This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Every night has a soundtrack. All you have to do is press play. It's Nick and Norah's infinite playlist, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. Boy, it feels like forever since we've done this because we were so far ahead of schedule.
I know.
So we were out of town and stuff.
We
recorded our prequel like weeks ago.
We were doing great. We were so far ahead of schedule, and now we're not again.
We're right on it. I'm recording this the night before it goes up. It happens. It happens. This is going to be an interesting one. We're talking about Nick and Nora's infinite playlist. We have every single one of our segments. So we're just going to get right into it with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
If you have not seen or read Nick and Nora's infinite playlist, Katie's going to give you a quick summary so you get the gist of what's going on.
Nick is trying to get over having been recently dumped. Norah is trying to shake off a bad off-and-on relationship. When they make the impromptu decision to pretend to be in a relationship, they discover that their social circles overlap, setting off a chain of events that cause them to spend a wild night running around New York City together, helping each other confront their exes and nurturing a budding new relationship.
Magical.
And that's basically it.
That's basically it. And spoilers, they end up together at the end, or at least in the movie. Unless the book is different. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
All right. That is roughly what happens in Nick and Nora's infinite playlist. We do have a brief Guess Who, so let's get into it right now.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay?
All right. I don't think you should struggle with any of these.
Okay.
But we'll see. The girl is dressed in a flannel shirt, and I can't tell whether it's because she's trying to bring back the only fashion style of the past 50 years that hasn't been brought back, or whether it's because the shirt is as damn comfortable as it looks. She has very pale skin and a haircut that reads private school, even though she's messed it up trying to hide it.
Okay, well, this is obviously Norah. I'm going to say Norah.
Yeah, it's Norah.
Yes, very clearly. I will say, how dare they rob us of Kat Dennings in a flannel shirt, though?
I agree.
How dare they?
How dare they?
How dare they?
I guess it's accurate that kind of like 90s grunge hadn't actually made a comeback yet in 2008. So if it was made now, she would definitely be rocking a flannel, I think.
Right. Well, it hadn't made a comeback, but the whole point is that's the whole point in the book. So it doesn't matter if it hadn't.
I guess. I feel like movies are more concerned about that.
That's
though.
fair. That's fair.
A boy with Astor Place hair who wears torn up, bleach-stained black jeans and a faded black t-shirt with orange lettering that says, "When I say Jesus, you say Christ." He's working the ironic punk boy Johnny Cash angle too hard.
I don't know what Astor Place hair is.
So I looked this up in an attempt to figure out what I was supposed to glean from that reference.
Yeah.
And Astor Place is a barbershop in New York City.
Oh, so this is like a very specific
Yes, this is a
reference.
very specific reference. And I still don't know what exactly I'm supposed to get from it. Like, I don't know.
Do you know what kind of barbershop it is?
Just a barbershop, I think. I mean, I got the vibe that maybe it was like an institution kind of place, but I don't know if that's supposed to indicate that like it's a cool haircut, or maybe they only do a certain type of haircut, or I'm not really sure what that's supposed to tell us, other than that he goes to a barbershop in New York.
There is also an Astor Place Theater, which is in the East Village, or NoHo / the East Village, that is since 1991 has been the home to the Blue Man Group, but I don't think that's relevant.
Maybe this is telling us he has blue hair.
He's bald.
That's even better, honestly.
He's bald. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like it's something that you have to be from New York to understand, maybe, so...
Yeah, Astor hair.
Yeah.
It just kind of looks like a generic city, like barber shop.
Yeah, that was the problem I was having. Like, I looked it up and I was like, I still don't know what I'm supposed to be getting from this detail.
It doesn't give a particularly distinct vibe, like, because all the pictures I'm seeing are all different. I mean, it's kind of like a punk, like, the entrance to it has, like, graffiti and stuff on the wall, but it's not like... the actual pictures of people getting their hair cut don't look particularly like they're all the same kind. I don't know. Interesting.
So if anyone understands that reference better than we do.
So I think it is a place that hipsters and stuff go, because so this is from their Facebook or their website. They have on their front desk, they have a thing that says, "We speak Italian, Russian, Greek, Spanish, French, Polish, Uzbek, Farsi, Moroccan, Portuguese, Bengali, Romanian, also bebop, hip hop, rap rock, and a little English." So that it's to me that means it's like a kind of like a hipstery.
All right, so
rock.
he has a cool
It's probably where cool
haircut.
musicians go to get their haircut in New York or something, would be my guess. That's my guess. Okay. So this doesn't really track. I mean, obviously it's one of the band members of some sort. This doesn't really track onto Nick, but I'm still gonna think it's probably Nick, because I do know that our narration goes back and forth between Nick and Norah, or like our point of view. So it makes sense that we would get a first person description of both of the characters, whereas normally you might not get one of the characters.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
In this sort of way, if it was just from Nick's perspective or just from Norah's perspective. It doesn't really track onto Michael Cera's character in the movie, but I'm still going to say that this is Nick.
It is Nick.
Okay.
And you are correct that it does not track
They
onto
realized
Michael Cera
after
version.
casting Michael Cera that he can't pull that look off at all.
No.
Without it coming across as a joke.
Yeah.
So they didn't even try.
All right, 2 for 2. Here's our last one. There is also the matter of her Hot Topic mall rat outfit. Short black leather skirt with buckles up the side, mass-produced vintage Ramones t-shirt, and piss yellow leggings with some horrible pair of pink patent shoes. She looks like a neon sign bumblebee by way of early Debbie Harry ripoff.
Okay, the only person that this really tracks onto, I believe, at least initially, I guess the whole evening, Caroline is wearing like a black leather skirt, I think, from my memory. She's not as sort of like Hot Topic mall ratty as this implies, but it's the only one that makes any sense, because Triss doesn't look anything like that. She's much more like, not preppy, but kind of whatever, like, sort of like rich girl, whatever. I'm trying to think of any other women characters that it could be other than Caroline, and I can't think of anybody, at least not major. I can't think of any other, because it's like all the other ancillary characters are men. Like there's our 3 main female characters, and then everybody else is dudes.
Yeah.
I think, basically, at least in the movie. So I'm going to say that this is Caroline.
This actually is Triss.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they don't do this at all with her in the movie.
Yeah.
She's like I said, she's
just dressed kind of generically, like generic for the
pretty
year.
Rich girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Caroline's not a bad guess for this.
Well, she's wearing
dressed
a black
like
leather skirt in the beginning of
yeah,
the movie.
she's dressed like very trendy for 2008.
Yeah.
She has like a bubble hem skirt,
right.
and like
I will say that
chunky necklaces.
It didn't track to Caroline perfectly either, but it tracked more to her to me than Triss in the movie, so that was why I went that direction. But So yeah, they didn't.
Yeah,
they kept
just
everybody
didn't go that
much
route with her.
They did that with everybody. All three of these, they didn't have the more distinct fashion. Like
yeah, it's a very watered down version of each character.
They're not nearly as. I mean, Nora's character was the closest. I mean, the only real difference is the lack of a flannel shirt. I guess would be like.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's pretty spot on. Whereas Nick and Triss don't remotely. At least I don't think she's dressed like Triss is dressed like that. She's wearing that shirt that he got her, that top, that kind of like.
She's just wearing like jeans and high heels
and like that like whatever, I don't even know what it's called. The shirt that he got her that we see the fantasy sequence of her in.
Oh yeah.
That's what she's wearing. I don't know what it is, but it's like just a whatever. I have no idea what it is because
I don't remember it distinctly enough.
Yeah, it's because I only remember it because it's in that one scene where she's like that fantasy sequence with him, and then later when she's like stripping in front of in front of his car.
It's like a semi corset inspired kind of top.
Yeah, kind of.
Anyways, by way of 2008.
All right, so 2 out of 3, but they didn't really follow the character descriptions that much, so. That's about as good as I could have hoped to do. All right, I got a lot of questions, so let's get into them and find out. Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So my first question, because it hit me right in the face immediately, is about Nick. And it's how much does Michael Cera doing his Michael Cera thing in this movie feel like the right fit for Nick, because he's just doing Michael Cera. I will add that ultimately he becomes less. It's the opening scene where he's on the phone and he's like walking around his room. He feels so painfully Michael Cera and so painfully like he's playing the same character as Scott Pilgrim, basically. Like they're like identical. And now I will say after that opening scene, he sort of flattens out a bit and becomes less of that like peak Michael Cera character. But still, I wanted to know, he's still there fairly significantly. He just drops from like an 11 out of 10 Michael Cera to like an 8 or 7 out of 10 Michael Cera performance. And that's not a quality rating. That's how much of a like Michael Cera.
Like he dialed it back.
Yeah, he dialed his Michael Cera-ness back a little bit for this one after that opening scene. Anyways, I wanted to know how much of that version of Nick feels like the version from the book.
It doesn't work for me.
Okay.
You may have gotten this from the description of Nick, but Nick in the book reads with like a definite more of a punk rock edge and a lot more personality than what Michael Cera brings to the table.
Michael Cera is like the epitome of like a personality vacuum, and I don't even mean that necessarily negatively. Like, because it's not even a personality vacuum. It's just he has like an inverse personality where it's like, oh God, I don't even know how. If you've seen Michael Cera in anything,
I know what you mean.
He does Michael Cera, and it's like he's so.
And for roles where that works, it's great.
Yeah.
And for roles where it doesn't work, it's not great.
Yeah.
But I liked that you described this as getting hit in the face with it.
Yeah.
Because it's the same way that I feel. It takes approximately no time into this movie for us to arrive at one of my biggest problems with this movie, which is that I don't buy Michael Cera as a desirable leading man. I don't buy it.
Yeah.
And I fully acknowledge that is because he just does nothing for me.
Right.
Like, at least partly. But, like, I buy him as sad and pathetic and easily dumped in that first scene.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that Norah would be into him.
Yeah.
I don't believe that Triss's character would be into him.
Yeah.
I also, in the book, they compare him to Patrick Swayze's character from Dirty Dancing.
Oh, yeah.
And putting Patrick Swayze and Michael Cera into categories that are even within relative proximity of each other is some kind of cardinal sin.
Absolutely. So I just want to preface all this way because I've seen our notes. It's going to sound like we're bagging on Michael Cera a lot, and we're truly not.
I am a little.
Fair enough. I'm actually not. I like Michael Cera in a lot of roles, and I think he's a very funny actor. I think he's very talented at certain things, and I think he even has more range than I think some people give him credit for, because I think he just ends up cast in a lot of the same roles because he does Michael Cera so well.
Yeah.
But the thing that was wild to me is that it felt so, and especially initially, he felt like the exact same character as Scott Pilgrim. Like I said, that kind of dials back over the course of the film. But it's funny because I agree that the whole point of Scott Pilgrim is that it makes no sense that he's this desirable, like that's the whole point.
Right, yeah, that's
the joke is like
that he's not a desirable leading man.
And yet somehow he keeps ending up and like he's kind of a miserable person, and we're not supposed to like him like that much, even though he is the protagonist. Like Scott Pilgrim's a fantastic movie and there's a lot going on, but and it's so funny to me because Scott Pilgrim, I looked it up, came out in 2010, and this came out in 2008. So this is like right after this, and I was wondering how much, because it to me feels like Edgar Wright might have watched this movie
and been like that guy.
That is perfect. Like he might have seen the charisma vacuum that he was in this film, and like it became this meta casting of like casting him in the exact same type of role.
Yeah.
Basically.
I mean, right down to, if I'm remembering Scott Pilgrim correctly.
It's identical.
Right down to being the only straight member of a gay band.
Yes.
And he's the bassist,
yes,
right?
He is the bassist, the only straight member of a gay band. I don't know if Kim's sexuality is ever explicitly stated.
Fair enough, yeah.
It might be. Actually, I think it is. I think she at numerous times says she's a lesbian. I can't remember. But, no, because Neil's not. But he's not part of the band originally. The other Neil, other Neil or whatever. And now, is it... It actually might not be that any of them are. Because his best friend is gay, though. Kieran Culkin, or whatever, one of the Culkins who's in it. He's gay. He's not.
I'm going to say it's been a very long time since I've seen this movie.
He's not
I'm probably just misremembering.
He's not in the band. I actually don't think the lead singer's gay, but I don't remember. Anyways, it's close enough.
That's very similar.
Very similar. And it does almost feel like a very intentional not send up, but like I said, this meta
and it's
ironic casting
because the graphic novels Scott Pilgrim predate the book Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, but the movie version, it's the other way around.
Yes, and from my understanding, the movie version of Scott Pilgrim takes a lot of liberties with the graphic novel. Like it's not a particular. I don't know for sure, but I think I've heard that it's not like a super close adaptation in terms of all the details. So I don't know how much of what comes before what or whatever. But it is really funny to me that he did these two movies back to back. And knowing Edgar Wright, there's just no way that it wasn't an intentional, like, ironic joke. Like, that was the joke, is like, oh my God, he makes no sense in this role as this character in Nick and Norah. And so we're going to cast him doing the exact same character, basically, dialed up a little bit, in Scott Pilgrim. But it makes sense because the whole story is about
the fact that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But here it just doesn't make sense.
Here it just doesn't make sense.
So
yes. I also straight up think, and I know early on this is kind of the point, is that they're finding, like, kind of figuring out, like, their dynamic and stuff. But even by the end, I straight up don't think that any two people have had less chemistry on screen together than Michael Cera and Kat Dennings.
They just have zero chemistry. It's the entire time. I never for a second buy that they are attracted to each other in any way.
Yeah. But going both ways. Like, it doesn't seem like either of them is... They just have no chemistry.
Not sexually, not romantically, not aesthetically.
No.
I don't buy that they have any interest in each other whatsoever.
And it's so funny because, like, him and Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Scott Pilgrim work in a weird way. But it's because she's doing a very specific thing with her character, and it's also Scott Pilgrim's hard because it's also like arch and over the like, and they're all these like crazy like art elevated comic book characters. So like it's, But it is so funny to me how little chemistry these two leads in this romantic comedy have together. I was like, wow. And it's, all that being said, I didn't hate the movie. Like, I think the movie's okay. Like, it's not great, but it's okay.
Like, it's
okay.
It's fine. I feel like the ideal way to watch this movie would be with a bunch of friends and you can all rag on it.
Yeah,
honestly.
Because it's got some fun, sweet parts, and it's got some. It is whatever, and we'll get into. But yeah, you're starting off way back from the starting line when your two leads just have no chemistry in your romantic comedy. So speaking of Norah, we're introduced to her and her friends early on in the movie, and very quickly, I think this is after they go out for the evening, which all this whole story takes place over one night, basically. And they go out for the evening, and they run into it's Norah and her friend Caroline, and then their other friend Triss, who is like an old childhood friend who's they've kind of like grown apart from, and Triss is like the popular cool girl who's kind of a bitch now. At this first bar they go to, they run into Triss, and Triss, like, very cattily is like throwing shade at Kat Dennings for not being attractive. And I was wondering,
a wild accusation to levy,
an incredible accusation to levy against Kat Dennings. But I wanted to know if in the book, I wanted to know if this was something that got sort of tweaked in the adaptation, or if it's literally just what it comes across as, which is Triss just being like a bitch, like just like being mean to her, regardless of Kat Dennings' objective level of attractiveness. She's just being a bitch to her because she doesn't like her and she's threatened by her or whatever. If it was that, or if truly, like in the book, is Norah supposed to be less attractive, or you know what I mean, like a little more.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Kind of. I do think in the movie the main idea is that Triss is just being a bitch in this moment.
Yeah.
In the book, I don't think that Norah is supposed to be homely necessarily.
Okay.
I think it's the old trope of like a serious kind of nerdy brunette who has flashy blonde friends. And I think she's supposed to think of herself as like a plain Jane.
Right.
But I don't know that that's necessarily what reality is.
Like reality-wise, yeah. That's fair. And that's kind of what I figured. It's just, it was just very funny to me. So the night moves on. They got to take Caroline home because she's very drunk. As you mentioned earlier, Nick has broken up or was dumped by Triss at this point. A bunch of things have happened, including Norah asking Nick to pretend to be her boyfriend because she was lying to Triss and them about having a boyfriend. She's like, oh, just she kisses him, blah, blah, blah. Get to a point where they're like gonna take Caroline home, and Nick's friends, his bandmates, are like grab Norah and they're like pull her into the van, and they're like, hey, we'll take her home. Go with Nick, and you gotta, he's great, go be with him. And they're like trying to hook them up together, like trying to play matchmaker. And I found this scene in the movie kind of strange, and I don't know if it was the editing or the I don't know what it was about it. It felt weird to me. Because, like, I know what the movie was going for here. I got, like, oh, like, his friends are trying to, like, be good friends. And they're like, yeah. But they're like, give her a bra. I don't know. And, again, it all plays into the fact that they're, like, gay. And it's like this, it's a very mid-2000s, like,
a very
type of rom-com scene where the gay friends are, like, giving the straight girl,
and,
like,
giving her fashion advice.
Tips and stuff. Like, it's very early 2000s. I get it. But I do wonder if that scene comes at all from the book, because it felt like it felt like a movie, like an early 2000s bad like movie trope.
I think yes. They don't give her a different bra in the book. They give her $50 in the book, and ask her to just like hang out with Nick.
That's weirder.
Yeah.
The bra thing's also weird, but at least
it's
less
weird in a different way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they changed that in the movie to avoid any kind of connotation of like sex work.
Yeah, right. Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know. I don't really have a preference. I think both of them are weird.
They're both kind of weird. I don't think the movie one. I think if the movie one was just done differently, it could be fine. Like the version of what happens in the movie, it was just something about the way it all played out felt uncomfortable to me. I think it's like the chaotic nature of it. Like, and with her friend being drunk in the car, like it just all felt so strange. I don't know, but it was fine. It was whatever. So there's this moment. And this is my first time I'm going to mention it, but this isn't the first time it came up. But this one in particular I thought was a very interesting, distinct line that I wanted to know about. Where, so as I said, they pulled her into the van, Norah into the van, and they gave her a Dubrall, and then they're kicking her back out, and they're like, hey, we'll take Caroline home. But Caroline has locked herself in Nick's car at this point. Or they locked the door. Or somehow she got locked in his car. And she's very drunk, and they're all trying to get her to unlock the door so they can get her out and take her home. And Norah says to her, because she's like pointing at the lock, like the little, and it's an old school, like you gotta pull the little lock up on the door because it's like a Yugo, which is like a car from the 80s or whatever, or 70s or something. And Norah says to her, just like we practiced, go like that. And she makes this very distinct
finger
motion, which if you know, you know. And she does that and says, just like we practiced, do that. And I was like, wait a second, what? Just like we practiced? What is? And now, obviously, there's an implication that she gets drunk a lot. We've already established this. Norah has talked about, please don't get drunk and make me have to take care of you. So this has happened. Maybe this stuff like this has happened before. But there's definitely some double entendre going on here. It felt like to me. And I wanted to know if that line... just like we practiced, go like that, and then making the very distinct. I'm trying to come up with the right word to describe it. The come hither motion.
Yeah, it's a hooking motion.
A hooking fingering motion. Trying to avoid saying it, I just said it. So, does that happen in the book?
It does not. There's not a scene where they're trying to unlock the car, nor is that specific line anywhere in the book. I did look.
Okay, because I feel like, and I had felt already at this point, and then this just like drove it home, that there's a lot of implied sexual tension / chemistry between Norah and Caroline. And
No, I agree.
Okay. And I was like, what is going... Because there's a scene early where she... And not that means anything, but she, like, smacks her ass in the hallway. But then there was a couple of lines of dialogue, and that was whatever. But then there was a couple lines of dialogue right after it that felt weirdly charged to me in a way that didn't feel like just, like, gals being pals.
Oh, they have way more chemistry than her and Nick, too.
Oh, way more chemistry. It's wild. But anyways, okay, so that doesn't come from the book.
Well, I would argue that there is some... I don't know that I would necessarily call it like sexual chemistry between Norah and Caroline in the book. There is some... like their relationship does, I think, have some implications, which I'll talk about later.
Okay.
There is arguably, I think, chemistry between Triss and Norah in the book. There's actually
not at all in the movie.
There's actually a scene in the book where Triss teaches Norah how to kiss.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like the movie was like, maybe that's a little much. Maybe like, even for 2008, they were like, okay, that's like a little. It would have
been a lot for people to handle in their 2008 teen rom-com movie.
I don't think so. I think it's more so that maybe they thought it might be a little too, like, not exploitative, but like, because I mean, at this point, this is post. I mean, there's a very famous scene in with Buffy, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Cruel Intentions or whatever. One of those movies where she makes out with a girl or whatever, and it's played very male gazy and very like, you know. And my guess would be that maybe they were trying to actually be kind of progressive in the sense of like, let's not have this thing in a way where it would
ended up
feeling like very male gazy and like, let's just watch these two girls make out.
I think the difference is, which I'll talk more about in a bit, but there are some pretty stark differences in Triss's character from book to movie. And I don't think it would have worked in the movie with what they're doing.
Oh,
with
yeah,
her.
no, not at all. It would have 100%
would have made
been
zero sense.
It would have made zero sense, and it also, the only way that it could have played would have been like titillation, male gazy,
like a
weird,
fantasy sequence or something.
Yeah. So they end up, his bandmates end up taking Caroline home in their van, and then Nick and Norah are going to go try to find Where's Fluffy, the band, to go watch them perform because it's their favorite band. As they're driving, Norah is asking him about his friends and like, hey, they're, he's like, oh, she'll be fine in the van. They're great. And she's like asking him, she's like, are they all gay? Or all your friends gay or something like that? And he explains that, like all of his bandmates are gay, which I think is only 2 of them. Because that third guy's like
third guy is like a hookup.
Like a groupie
that the other guy
kind of deal. Yeah. Anyways, at one point there's this line, and just caution for the R word. And he says to Norah at this point, if anybody's going to get raped in that van, it's going to be a guy because they are all gay is the implication. Like that's the joke. And I wanted to know if that nightmare line.
It's not from the book.
Okay.
I wrote in my notes, hello 2008, you are cringe.
Yeah. That's one of those jokes that has aged very
poorly.
Yes. That just like you get, it's one of those jokes that's like, I get, it's like I'm sure it felt progressive at the time because it is a joke. Like I get at the time.
Right. It feels like it's flipping the script at the time.
Right. It feels like a subversive progressive joke at the time, but boy, oh boy.
Boy, oh boy. Yeah.
Not good.
Aged like a fine glass of whole milk.
Yes. They keep discussing as they're driving, and he asks her about drinking or something, and they both say that they don't drink. And Norah asks Nick, "Are you straight edge like I am?" And I was like, "Oh my God, straight edge! That's a word I haven't." I felt like Obi-Wan Kenobi. I was like, "That's a word I haven't heard in whatever. It's been a long time since I watched Star Wars, but whatever he says, yeah." I felt like old Ben Kenobi in that moment, and I was wondering and I couldn't tell, and it seems ultimately like it is the case that she is maybe straight edge, and she's not being sarcastic because she is, and both of them are very, dry, sarcastic people, and I couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic or if she was in fact like straight edge, and I was like, okay. So is Norah straight edge?
They're both straight edge in the book. They have a whole conversation about it.
Wow.
Do you want to explain for anyone who doesn't know what straight edge means?
Yeah. If you don't recall, if you didn't live
if you didn't go to high school circa
2008, 9, 10, whatever, 7, 5, 6, straight edge was the cool name for kids who didn't do drugs or drink or any of that thing. But it was particularly like a punk version of, like it was distinct from kids who were like very religious or it was a version of,
it was like specifically for kids who were into the kind of scenes where you would expect them to be drinking and doing drugs, but they were like being subversive and not doing it.
Yeah, straight, like it's like the punk version of being a Puritan, basically. Kind of. I mean, like, kind of. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying, like, that is kind of what it was. Like, that, or it's the punk version of being a teetotaler. Like, it's,
I guess. But yes, that is an element in the book.
So she's not being sarcastic.
No, she's not being sarcastic. It's very 2006.
Right.
As we've discussed.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know. I don't think the kids say that anymore.
No, I don't think straight edge is the thing anymore. Or at least the term. I'm sure there are plenty of kids who... I wonder if there is a new version of straight edge.
Of it? Yeah, I don't know.
There probably is.
I don't spend enough time on TikTok to learn these things.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because, like, in high school, I like was straight. I
Yeah,
wasn't,
so was I.
yeah,
I didn't call myself
Yeah,
that.
I would never have called myself that, but I
Yeah.
did not drink. I did not do drugs. But like,
Because I mean, and
but
part
it wasn't for me. It wasn't like I was opposed to it. I just didn't do. Like I was just like, I
Yeah.
just don't like. I'm not interested.
yeah,
like,
and,
whatever.
and part
Like,
of the reason that we are kind of chuckling at this
yeah.
is not because we're like judging the
No,
choice.
I do want to be very clear
Yeah.
that this is not like an indictment or not a critique
Yeah.
of people who choose not to do drugs or to drink or whatever. And like I said, I did not in high school.
It was more that, at least my experience, and it sounds like your experience
Yes.
too, was that people who specifically called themselves this
yeah.
were kind of insufferable.
Yes, it is very much the same way that people, because in the same way that I think that veganism is correct and a morally correct stance, and I aspire to be vegan, or at least vegetarian or whatever. That being said, there are times that some vegan people can be, and especially like in high school age, like
Yeah.
because all high schoolers are insufferable.
Yes, that is also true.
Regardless of what your
Yeah.
your label was, you were probably insufferable as a high schooler. And so in that same way, it's more so that the people who labeled themselves as straight edge tended to be kind of obnoxious.
Yeah.
But not that what they were doing was obnoxious, just like
And it honestly, like, and it feels even weirder to me in a young adult novel that I know was written by adults.
Yeah.
There's like an extra level of even like moral superiority feelingness to it.
Yeah.
Like preachiness almost.
it is interesting. I wonder, to me it feels like what it was is that maybe the authors who were adults at the time were like us, who didn't drink or do drugs in high school or whatever. Just, again, not for really any, at least for me, it wasn't for any particular reason other than, like, one, I didn't want to get in trouble. Like, I was not like a troublemaker. Like, I liked not being in trouble. But also, I don't know, it just didn't interest me. Like, it just wasn't something I was, like, into the idea of doing. But it also wasn't something that I was against. Like, I didn't care that other people, like, I just didn't care. Like, it was just like, whatever. And so I just never did it. But I wonder if maybe it's adult authors who were like me in high school, and then reframing that their personal like story through something they had heard about in 2005 or whatever, whenever the book is written. You know what I mean?
I think there could be an element of that. I think there could also be an element of, we'll make our characters ascribe to this kind of like label lifestyle, quote unquote, so that we don't have to dance around, you're portraying underage characters drinking. And, I mean, there's Caroline who's drunk, but we never, in the book, we never like actively see her drink.
I don't actually know if we do in the movie. No, it's true, we do.
We don't spend nearly as much time with her in the book as we do in the movie either.
Yeah.
So maybe it was their way of addressing that as well. And, you know, for me, it just kind of comes off, when I know it's written by an adult, I can't help but read it as preachy. I just, and maybe that's something that I need to work on, but I just cannot help reading it that way.
I don't think that's unfair. It was just very interesting. It was such a blast from the past for me of like, oh God, straight edge. Like I said, that's a term I haven't heard in a great many years. Like, holy
very
cow.
long time.
Yeah. So they end up getting in some arguments and whatnot. Their relationship does not start out great, and at one point they get into a big argument, and I don't remember what Nick says or what happens, but it instigates a physical altercation, and Norah punches Nick in the throat, right in his throat, and it's very funny to watch Kat Dennings punch Michael Cera in The Adam's Apple. I found it very hilarious.
This is pretty funny, yeah.
But I wanted to know if that happened in the book, because it did make me laugh a lot in the movie.
No, they don't have a random fight right away, and Norah does not throat punch Nick in the book.
Boo.
The closest thing to this scene in the book, in my opinion, is a little bit later on. They're dancing together in like a venue, and she shoves him and yells, "Why are you so nice?" and storms off. And I don't really care for the movie's version. To me, it felt kind of extreme and without the benefit of Nora's inner monologue, I felt like it came off as kind of random.
I don't necessarily disagree. It just made me laugh. I liked it. I like watching Michael Cera get punched in the throat.
I liked watching Michael Cera get throat punched.
Again, I like you, Michael Cera. You're fine. I just, you got a punchable throat.
He's pretty punchable.
Punchable throat. So as we mentioned, Caroline is very intoxicated and is wandering around the city because to establish this, she was in the van being taken home by Nick's bandmates, but she came to. She was blacked out. She woke up and she's like, "Holy shit, where am I?" And she understandably panics and assumes she has been like kidnapped or is going to be taken advantage of in this van. And so she gets out of the van and runs off. And she ends up in a train station or a bus station trying to catch a bus to get back to Inglewood or wherever they're from. And she ends up in the bathroom because she needs to throw up because she, again, is very drunk. Mm-hmm. And this scene is the worst scene
maybe ever.
It's one of the worst scenes put to film. She goes and throws up in the bathroom, and then she gets a phone call, and she answers her phone, and then she drops her phone in the toilet, and then she also drops her chewing gum in the toilet. And she gets both of them out and continues to use both of them in their previous capacity. And I was nauseous, and I do not very easily get nauseous from watching things. Like it takes a lot. And this scene, hoo boy, got me there. And I wanted to know if it happened in the book.
It did not. This is totally a movie creation.
Good Lord.
The book spends almost no time, like I mentioned, with Caroline or with any of Nick's friends. We're basically just with Nick and Norah the whole time. I did like some aspects of keeping Caroline in the narrative, but I strongly disliked this scene, as well as the reoccurring appearance of her gum.
Yeah, I didn't like that either. Particularly in this scene, but just in general, was not a big fan of it. I didn't, gross, don't like it. So let's talk about this. There's this whole subplot where eventually Norah runs into Triss. And they're in like a convenience store or something, chatting. And Triss is like being, again, a bitch to her because at this point she knows that her and Nick are potentially like
an item
or becoming an item. And so she's trying to like kind of stave that off. And the way she does this is by talking to Norah about how she knows or has heard that she's never orgasmed before, that Norah hasn't. And that and making her very self-conscious about it in an attempt to like sabotage her relationship with Nick, basically. And I wanted to know if that subplot came from the book because that was an interesting subplot that has a resolution.
Yes,
which we'll talk about.
That it does.
But I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to discuss it, and I wanted to know if it came from the book.
I would say no. In the book, Norah has concerns that she's frigid, which is a word that the book uses.
Okay.
Because that's what her dick of an ex has told her.
Towel.
Yes.
Towel.
There's not a subplot specifically about her never having had an orgasm, although I suppose you could interpret concerns that she's frigid as never
with some sort of like concern about bedroom performance or whatever.
I mean, it is a concern about bedroom performance, but there's not like we're never specifically told, oh, she's never had an orgasm,
right? Because it could be something else. It could be a million other things.
The vibe that I got from the book was more that the reason that this criticism was levied at her was because she didn't respond in the exact way that he felt she should be responding.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Interesting. So at this point, I don't remember how this even happens, but Michael, he goes because Triss is out waiting at the car, waiting in her car, and he's like, oh, I'll give her Nick's like, I'll give her a ride home, and he ends up leaving Norah in the van with Caroline to go give Triss a ride home or whatever. And as he's giving her a ride home, she's like rubbing her feet on his face, and the scene was also
That's not from the book.
very funny. Not from the book.
No.
Okay. I say funny. I don't know.
There's no foot rubbing.
No face foot rubbing. Okay.
No free feet.
This just felt like a thing that a particular writer
Yeah.
worked into
And I don't
somewhere
know,
into the screenplay.
I don't know anything about this director.
I don't
If
either.
that's part of his
It was not directed by
oeuvre.
Quentin Tarantino, so.
or the Nickelodeon guy.
Oh yes, or the Nickelodeon guy, but he could have been a producer at somewhere.
could have
It
been.
wouldn't surprise me if he somehow. And yeah, I know who you're talking. I don't.
What is
whatever
that guy's
name
name?
is. The iCarly and
Yeah.
the whatever that guy. No, I don't know. And again, not to king shame foot fetishes. You do you. It's just, it was like, why is this happening in this moment?
I will say, as far as fetishes go, I feel like that is one that you are often like confronted with
Yes.
in media where you might not otherwise be expecting it.
Yeah, that is true. It is the one that tends to, it feels like it sneaks in. Well, and not that there are others, but it does
Yeah.
it is one that tends to feel like it gets like backdoor snuck into media
Yeah.
more often than many others.
Yeah.
At least a little more often. Again, there are plenty that that make appearances that are not necessarily like make appearances and not referenced as directly, like they're not presented directly like this is a sexual fetish.
Yeah.
They're more like, again, sort of subvertedly.
I think it's just
Put into
easy
stuff,
to
but-
like, it's easy to argue it away.
Yeah.
It's just a foot.
Yeah. And again, I want to make it clear. I have no issue with, like, whatever. Go to town. Fucking rub your feet all over anybody's face. I don't care. And it also,
As long as they're consenting.
as long as they're consenting, yeah. It was just, it was just, I don't know. It was just funny to me, and I wanted to know if it came from the book, but it does not.
I will say, too, I would not be pleased in that moment.
True.
She's been wearing high-heeled sandals all
Yes.
night. Her feet are filthy.
It is not a fetish that I have, so I would be very
Yeah.
much like, please get your goddamn
Please.
feet off of my face. I would.
Please. Your dirty feet that have been a quarter of an
Yes.
inch from the New York sidewalk
Yes,
all night.
evening. I would
Please.
absolutely remove her feet from my face with a quickness. With a quickness. So at one point they end up at Norah. At this point, she then texts Tal, her ex-boyfriend, and meets up with him because Nick has abandoned her, and they're hanging out at a bar. And a whole bunch of stuff happens. Basically, they seem to be kind of getting back together a little bit, and then he's like pushing his mixtape on her, or like his band's record album on her to give to her dad, who we find out is a big like music producer,
Big time music
producer, and he's basically just trying to use her for that. And she ends up she realizes this again and kind of storms out. And as she's leaving, they're at like a very fancy bar, like with bottle service or whatever. And as they're leaving, oh, and that's the other thing is like he asked her to like take care of the check because
He wants it comped.
Yes, because she
'Cause
doesn't.
Her dad's important.
Yeah, her dad's important, and she seems to not pay for. Like she gets into every bar they go to. Like everybody knows who she is and just lets her in. And so like all of her stuff gets comped or whatever. And he's like, "Hey, can you take care of our bill or whatever?" And she talks to the waitress on her way out. And what she says to the waitress, I found this so annoying. I want to know if it was in the book, because what she says to the waitress in this moment, and this is a little detail that just made me so angry. She goes up to the waitress and she looks at the receipt and she shows it to the waitress and she goes, "I think you meant 2 zeros there, not one," and then walks away. Like the joke being like, oh, they owed
even more.
They owed $300, but she turned it into $3,000 or whatever, or whatever. No, I guess that wouldn't make sense, but you know what I mean. Like they owed $150 and she turned it into $1,500.
Yeah.
But that's so stupid because the waitress looks as confused as you would in that situation if somebody said that to you. Because if you were, in fact, trying to get somebody's bill, like if you were mad at your boyfriend or ex-boyfriend or whatever and wanted to get his bill bumped up, you wouldn't do it by telling the waitress, "Oh, you forgot a zero." You would go, oh, you're missing. Oh, they ordered like 3 of these and 6 of these. Oh, you're missing a bunch of, you know what I mean? You would explain that like, oh, a bunch of drinks were missing, or they actually ordered like, oh, you only have a bottle service for 4 people here. They did bottle service for 10 people.
Yeah.
And like that's how you would do it. Not, you're missing a 0.
I think the movie just didn't want to spend time on it.
I get it, but I found that so infuriating. And it's so funny to me because the waitress looks confused and assuredly was like, no, I didn't. And then just gave them the normal check. Like, so it didn't work. There's no way it worked. I don't know. I found that very annoying. I want to know if it happened in the book.
That's not from the book.
Again, it's a little thing. I just thought it was so dumb that it drove me crazy. It doesn't matter, but I thought it was silly. So as we mentioned, Nick has now taken Triss home. She's rubbing her feet on him. She's like, hey, we should pull off down by the river and do fun stuff. So they get down to the river and they're sitting there in the car, and she starts stripping and trying to seduce Nick at this point. And then Nick realizes, oh no, I've made a grave mistake. I actually really like Norah, not this bitch. And he just drives away and leaves her
there
in the middle of nowhere
by herself
by the river in New York, like in somewhere in New York City.
In the wee hours of the morning.
The wee hours it's past midnight roughly, at least by this point. He just leaves this 17-year-old, 18, whatever, this high school girl in the middle of nowhere in New York by herself and drives away. I want to know if that happened in the book, because I get what the sentiment, but also, bro, I guess she's a bitch, but like,
bro,
don't just leave her in the middle of nowhere.
That definitely does not happen in the book. And like you, like I get what the movie is trying to convey to us, but also like, we're supposed to like Nick right now, and that makes me not like him.
No, not at all. Again, it's very much like, I get what you're doing, but you need to do this slightly different. They just needed to be somewhere a little less remote, a little less like, I'm stranded at the docks, like in the middle of New York City at 3 a.m. Like, it just, like I said, anything could have happened to her, and it just like the worst possible. Like, there's no way there's no way I come out of this liking Nick for this. No. There's just no way. Even no matter how much of a bitch she is, this is terrible. Like, don't do that. It's real bad. But during her strip tease scene, she kissed the windshield, and then we get this fantastic dramatic scene of Nick using his windshield wipers to wipe her lipstick kiss off the windshield. It's amazing. I want to know if that's described in the book.
It's not from the book.
Okay, good. It's because it's dumb. It's not. I mean, I get it. It's fine. It's a fun dumb rom-com moment, but it cracked me up. So he does meet back up with Norah, and they're now hanging out. She's at a restaurant. They meet up at the restaurant, and they're kind of like, we get like a montage of them kind of walking and talking, and enjoying the evening and kind of getting to know each other. And at one point, Norah explains that Nick was her first kiss besides Tal, her ex-boyfriend, who she had been with for 3 years. But she says, unless you count Becca Wiener from summer camp. And explains that she had kissed this girl at summer camp, and that beyond kissing her, they had seemingly been in a summer camp relationship for several days at summer camp. And at this point, I was like, okay, so combining this with the stuff earlier, like Nora's like 100% bi, but the movie just kind of plays it like completely in the background and ignores it or uses it as like a joke. And I wanted to know if that same kind of thing felt like if that came from the book, or if the movie was adding this, or what. Because I thought that was disappointing.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Okay.
I want you all to envision that meme of the seagull with its head back, and then in the next frame it flips its head forward, and it has like laser beam eyes.
Yeah.
That's me right now. That's what I want you to picture. So Nora does mention this same story in the book. I don't think she tells Nick about it. I think it's just part of like her inner thoughts. There are definitely aspects of the book that make me feel like Nora is coded bisexual. The main arguments for it being obviously the Becca Wiener story, her experience with Triss that I mentioned earlier, and her arguably codependent relationship with Caroline. However, she is never explicitly labeled bisexual in the text. But Nora also displays quite a bit of biphobia and homophobia in the book. Specifically, she's very concerned throughout that Nick might be gay or bi. And she expends a lot of mental energy on this concern. A handful of things that deeply concern her include his using cherry-flavored chapstick.
Wow.
This does predate the Katy Perry song, by the by.
Yeah.
The suspicion that he might use cologne, although she later decides that he doesn't.
So far, I'm
use
2 for
cologne.
2 on this list. Or at least I don't use chapstick much anymore. But when I was a kid, I very often, and even in high school, I very often had cherry-flavored chapstick.
I mean, it's the best
And I did
chapstick.
use cologne. I still do.
And also his knowing exactly one designer shoe name, which is kind of doubly funny considering that the example in the book is Manolos, which
Yeah.
is something that anyone could have easily picked up through cultural osmosis while freaking Sex and the
Yeah.
City was
This
in
is
its
like
original
peak Sex
run.
in the City, yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah, you've seen an episode of Sex in the City, you probably know a designer shoe.
Yeah. So, like I said, she expends a lot of mental energy on this worry. And eventually she arrives at this conclusion. This is a quote from the book. Maybe the simple diagnosis of either hetero or homo is misleading. Maybe there's just sexuality and it's bendable and unpredictable.
Okay.
Which,
I mean, yeah.
okay, I'm fine with reading her as someone who might be bi or pan, but is working through internalized biphobia. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
But also, like, in that moment, reading that book, I was like, Rachel Cohn, you can just say bisexual.
Yeah.
You can just say it. No one will die. It's fine. You can just say the word.
Yeah. I guess my only, I agree with that. I think my only point would be that maybe I could see the argument that, especially, what year was this book written?
2006.
Okay. So only a couple years before the movie.
Yeah.
And right, I was a junior in high school when the book was written, or when the book came out, I guess. I guess my only thing that I would say is that I could see that, I know for me in high school, going through a public school system with public school system, Midwest public school system, sex ed, that I feel like I was aware that bisexuality was a thing, but I don't know if I really knew, like, understood it in any real way, and especially didn't know what pan was until like high school, and so those terms, at least to me at that time, if as a high schooler, I may have not had the language literacy, like, and the actual like literacy to understand exactly what those terms meant. To be fair, you could use this book to teach people.
Yes.
But I guess my point would be that the quote that you read there, maybe the simple diagnosis of either hetero or homo is misleading. Maybe there's just sexuality and spendable and unpredictable. To me, is a very progressive, reasonable understanding of sexuality that I tend to agree with in general. Apart from, obviously, like, we have labels for a reason that are useful in speaking and in discussing ourselves and people and that sort of thing. But I could see the argument, I guess, at least, of like, I could see the argument for just describing, like, giving the sort of definition of being bi or pan or having a flexible sexuality without, like, explicitly labeling it, in the sense of, like, maybe that label won't mean anything to the people reading this, but just explaining what it is will. That being said, you could explain what it is, and then you could label
the label.
it. I agree. I'm just,
because I think I didn't read this in high school. I think had I read it in high school, I might have resonated with that definition,
Yeah.
but I don't think that I would have known what to do with that without having a label to put to it.
That's fair. That's fair. It's totally, yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. I would, like I said, I'm kind of playing a little bit of devil's advocate here.
Further, I also think that Norah potentially would have been more likely to have that vocabulary than either of us were.
Oh yeah, I mean she went to New York City or whatever,
New York City. She's she's supposed to be at like a private Catholic school, but she's still like, and
she's existing in music scenes and in scenes where that stuff was much more discussed than living in small town Midwest.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, for sure. 100%.
I mean, I feel like if you're coming up in a culture where you have a lot of familiarity with like your David Bowies, your Freddie Mercurys,
yes.
You've probably heard the term bisexual.
I 100% admit that like I said, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate here just for the sake of kind of doing it, but which is a very straight white male thing of me to do. I'm just like I said, I'm just kind of bantering for the sake of content. But anyways, I just wanted to I agree. I think it's kind of disappointing and dumb that you wouldn't just take that extra step and give some people some
just like bring it home.
Yeah. So they finally end up together. They end up at her home, her studio, her dad's studio. I don't know if it's in his home.
I think it's like his place of business.
Yes,
it's supposed to be.
It wouldn't surprise me if they like live, because it's New York City, so probably like they live in the same building that the studio's in. Maybe, I don't know.
They live in Englewood.
Yeah, and I don't know where Electric Lady Studio is because it's a real place. Anyways, they end up at her dad's studio, which, as we mentioned earlier, he's a very famous music producer.
He's worked with all the famous people.
He really has, and I Googled it. I mean, this is a real thing. Like, the guy exists. Although we never get her last name, so we can't, because there was two dudes who founded this studio. I assume her dad is supposed to be, and I can't remember his name now, the guy who was the audio engineer, because there was one guy that was an audio engineer, and the other guy was more of like the business guy, and it sounds to me like her dad was supposed to be like the audio, like the music guy. But 100% real studio that a bunch of Jimi Hendrix and all these people recorded at and all that sort of stuff. And they end up in the studio and it blows Michael Cera's mind because he's a big, audiophile music head. So this is where they have their big moment, and they end up making out in the studio and then having sex. Having some kind of degree of sex. Yeah, I'm going to call it sex because limiting sex to penis and vagina sex is dumb and limiting. They have sex. There is sexual contact that happens. And so they have sex in the studio, and the thing that's very funny in the movie is that like they were going there to record. Michael Cera was gonna record a song, whatever. It doesn't matter. So they're recording at the time. So I would love to think that her dad comes into the studio the next day and is like, "Oh, what's this on the tape?" And he hits play, and it's just Norah having an orgasm on tape. So they have sexual relations in the studio on microphone, and it's recorded. And I wanted to know if that happened in the book.
No. So they don't like. So what happens in the book is that they go to like a random hotel and they like kind of hook up like in one of the rooms where like the ice is kept.
Right.
They're like hooking up like by the light of the Pepsi machine.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, the ice.
Yeah, the ice
machine
room.
It's by the stairwell
Yeah.
normally. Yeah.
So
or the elevators.
But they don't have quite as much sexual contact.
Okay.
In the book as they do in the movie. They make out, like they come pretty close. They disrobe a little bit.
Okay.
But eventually they're like, no, we shouldn't do this right now. It's too soon.
Okay, so they don't do that there. But then at any point, so getting back to our orgasm discussion from earlier, we've established that Norah has never had an orgasm.
Right.
And I would like to know if a high school aged Michael fucking Sarah makes her orgasm for the first time, because that's a crime against humanity. This movie, how dare you?
No.
Again, love you, Michael Sarah. You're great, but
And I just like the audacity of this movie to ask me to swallow that.
yes,
To ask me to believe for a second that this girl who has purportedly never had an orgasm is now given her first one by her high school boyfriend.
I don't even care that it's Michael Sarah. It doesn't make it better, but I don't care. A high school, no. 0%.
No.
0% chance. 0%.
And it's played in the movie as like empowering. I don't find it particularly empowering.
No, he just seemingly plays her genitals like a bass, and it works out. And that, yeah, and it's just again, that is not to imply that there aren't plenty of people who have sex in high school with their boyfriends and have orgasms and that whatever. It's just, if it's a particular issue for you that you've never had an orgasm, it seems particularly unlikely that some random 17-year-old boy is gonna like know the secret. Especially back then, the internet wasn't even really a thing. He wasn't looking up tips. I don't know. Just seems really unlikely.
Just the sheer audacity of the movie to ask me to buy this.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, I didn't either.
I don't. And it's not helped by the fact that they don't have chemistry together.
It's made even worse by the fact that they have zero chemistry and it's Michael Sarah. Like, who just exudes zero sexual, like, charisma. Which, again, is fine. It's just, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Oh, boy, that scene. Wild. So they end up, she gets a text alerting her to where, after the sex, alerting her to, oh my gosh, where's Fluffy's? They're performing, and they all go running out as they're putting their clothes on. And they get up to this rooftop, and Where's Fluffy is there on the rooftop. They found him, and they're going to do a live performance on the roof like the Beatles. And I wanted to know if that's where our big finish of the book ends, because that's where our movie ends, kind of.
No. They do see Where's Fluffy, but they see them quite early in the book, actually.
Oh, okay.
Searching for the concert is not really a plot point.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, because the movie makes that like the ultimate goal after Caroline gets.
Yeah, that's kind of the through line.
Well, it's like both. Like for a while, it's both finding Caroline, and once she gets missing, it's like finding Where's Fluffy, and then it's like, oh, Caroline's missing. Let's find Caroline, and then it's back to finding Where's Fluffy again. Okay. Huh. All right. But then they just leave. They just leave before the performance even happens. And they don't get to see the band, and I don't know what happened there. My only thought, so Tal and Trish show up, and they're like...
Yeah, they have like double confrontation.
Yeah, big confrontations with both of them right in front of each other. And they both decide, I guess the idea is just like, let's get out of here. We don't want to deal with them.
Yeah, I'm not much help here.
Okay.
Because this does not happen in the book. And I guess the idea is that like they don't.
I mean, this is what they say in the movie. Is like Michael Sarah says, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry we missed the concert." And Michael Sarah's like, "Oh, I got everything I need right here."
Yeah,
and
I think it's
whatever.
like, "Oh, we have each other now."
Yeah,
so
which fine.
That's all we need.
But also, what you were there. Like you were there. Why would you not? You could watch the concert together.
Yeah,
like what?
You could have each other and your concert.
Like why is I just was so weird to me.
know.
Like I get the romantic
and
gestury moment of it, but
I guess they just really wanted it to end like the final thing to be the same as the book, because the book does end with them running onto the subway together.
Yeah,
which is what the movie's like final thing is.
Yeah.
But they aren't skipping out on the concert in the book, so like I genuinely am not sure what the movie wants me to do with that.
Yeah, I think the movie somebody thought up the final shot which is a good shot. Like, it's a nice shot. Like, he's like walking up the escalator while she's like talking to him, and then she gets onto the escalator and they kiss and they like slide out of frame together and the movie ends. Like, it's a good final shot for your rom-com set in New York City. Like, I get it. Like, somebody, and so that's what I think it was, is like somebody thought of that shot because of the book. Like, because of the book ending with them getting on the subway, they thought of that shot and were like, well, we got to get them off the roof. But it just makes no sense.
Well, what they should have done, in my opinion, is had them arrive to the show too late.
Yeah.
Because they're, like, busy with each other.
Yeah.
Like, and enjoying each other's company. So they get there, but they get there, like, too late, and it's over. And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we missed the show.
Yeah.
That's fine. I have everything I need right here.
Boom. Subway
Boom.
kiss. Boom.
We're back on track.
Perfect. I agree. Dumb. Weird. It is weird because there's no explanation again in the movie. That was the thing that was really weird to me, is there wasn't like a super clear explanation. They just all of a sudden are not at the concert and are on the subway, and I'm like, wait, why did you leave the concert? Okay, sure, fine. All right, I have a few questions in Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
This first one, I had no idea. Very early on, there were several times where there were slang terms thrown about that I did not understand at all. And one of them was, at one point, Norah says to Caroline, or vice versa, he's bridge and tunnel. And they're like, ah. And I was like, what is happening? He's bridge and tunnel? What does that mean?
Remember who they said that about?
I don't remember who they said that about.
Okay.
I think Nick,
so
maybe? I don't know.
I had that issue in the book, too. There were a lot of, like, dated, slangy references that proved challenging to Google.
Okay.
I think this one means that he's from New Jersey, so he takes the bridge and tunnel to get to New York City. Like, as opposed to already living there. Or I guess it could be a weird slang way to say that somebody's gay.
I think bridge and tunnel being from Jersey makes sense, because I
think that makes more
I believe
sense.
Nick is from New Jersey.
Yeah,
I think he says
is.
he's from Hoboken, doesn't he? I think something like that. So that makes sense, and that totally makes sense. But I get it. I get the movie. I get what the movie's doing. It's just, unless you're from New York City at that time, I feel like you're just like, what? Like, I was so perplexed by what. There was several. It wasn't the only one. There were a few things. It only happens at the beginning, to be fair, from my memory. I don't remember this continuing throughout the movie, but there were like 4 or 5 terms in the beginning of the movie where I was like, what did they just say? What were those words? And I don't remember what the other ones were. Just bridge and tunnel was the only one I recall. But there were several where I was like, I guess that's a very specific local reference that I'm not aware of. I was like, I don't think if I wrote a story of my high school youth, I don't know if we would have slang term. I actually probably would. I just don't remember them.
I think the closest thing to something like that we might say here is saying that somebody's from across the river to denote that they're from Illinois.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's a very similar, but that's also very clear what that means.
Right.
He's from across the river. I wouldn't say he's bridge and river. Like, what, like, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't say it like that. Like,
yeah,
that's what's weird about it to me. Like, saying he's from across the river is just stating where he's from. Whereas, like, this is like a slang term that's very,
that was definitely like a definite issue in the book as well. Like, there was just a lot of referential stuff that was hard to Google and to suss out.
Yeah. Next question, and I found this incredibly confusing in the movie.
I know you paused the movie to ask me about it.
I could not tell if if Norah knew who Nick was when she sees him at the show. Because she knows that Triss was dating a guy named Nick. Mm-hmm. And then they go to this show that night, and his band's performing, and she sees him. Mm-hmm. And she's like, Caroline makes a comment that she's like flirting with him visually, like, you know, like making eyes at him. And to me, the implication was that she knew it was him because it's been established that she's like really likes his mixtapes and stuff, but she's never met him.
Right.
They explicitly say, "Oh, I've never met him or seen this guy, but I really love his mixtapes." But then when she starts making eyes at this dude, at Nick at the concert, I was like, "Oh, but she must know who he is, that he's this dude in this band, and that's why she's like making eyes at him." But that's not I could not tell if she knew that in that scene in the first concert, like when Nick's performing, if she knew who that was or not.
She does not.
The movie is a terrible job.
The movie does a pretty bad job with it. So she's never met Nick. She just knows of him from Tris.
Which the movie sets up, and
Right.
I got that part. But then we get to the concert and it got confusing.
Well, I think this aspect of the film was slightly complicated both by what you mentioned of like the scene leading up to it when he's playing in the band, but also by the fact that in the book, Nick and Tris were only together for 6 months. And I feel like the movie implies that it was a longer relationship. And like at only 6 months and Tris being the person that she is, I totally buy that Norah wouldn't know Nick. And we'll recall also that this is set before like the really big boom of social media, so she probably wouldn't have just like looked him up.
I guess that's the thing that was toughest for me is that you say it's set in 2006 before the big boom of social media. Everybody I knew had MySpace in 2006.
Yeah, but MySpace is different from social media now. Nobody used their real name on MySpace.
True, but I knew, like, I was friends, like, or however it worked. Like, all of my friend, like, I feel like a bunch of the people from my high school, I knew who their MySpace pages were. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it wasn't hard to find because we all had pictures on it. Like, I feel like it wasn't hard if she knew, that's the thing that was confusing to me is that if she knew, oh, Triss's boyfriend, it would be not hard to find him on MySpace and then find a picture.
Yeah,
of
I
him.
agree, especially because he was in a band.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the key things on MySpace.
That was what was confusing to me is like,
I will say,
oh, I've never met him. Sure, fine.
Yeah.
But to then not know who he was, beyond that, like they're going to this concert with Triss to some extent. Like she's there with them. And she didn't say, oh, Nick's band's performing. Like, they didn't know that Nick's band was performing. I just found the whole thing so confusing.
I will agree that the movie doesn't handle it particularly well. I will say, I had this in another section, but I'll go ahead and put it here. The movie does a flippity flip. In the book, it's Nick who approaches Norah and asks her to be his girlfriend for 5 minutes. The movie makes that Norah, which I guess could further be confusing for like, I mean, I arguably would maybe recognize him in the book as well. But the book does not mention social media at all.
Right.
It's like conceivably not a thing in this universe.
Okay.
I will posit the argument that Norah would maybe be one of those people who was like too cool for it.
Maybe. I didn't know anybody who didn't have a MySpace page.
I didn't either, but I'm sure they existed.
I'm sure they did, but yeah, I didn't know anybody who didn't have a MySpace page back in 2006. All right, last question. So I feel like Caroline, as we mentioned, she gets very drunk and it's about getting her home. I feel like in the movie, her drunken subplot is supposed to be funny, but to me, it just came across as kind of horrifying and sad. And I wanted to know if how the book handles that. Is her subplot, her drunken meandering, supposed to be funny? Is it supposed to be scary and sad? What's the deal there?
So like I said, we spend minimal time with Caroline in the book. She isn't really sad or funny. Her character just kind of is.
Okay.
It's just the messy drunk BFF trope.
Right.
And she's not really in the narrative, so we don't really glean anything from it. I think the movie was going for funny.
Yeah, they 100% were going for funny.
I think they maybe could have kept it funny-ish.
Absolutely agree.
but they pushed the line too far,
Yep.
and the portrayal of Caroline went too dark.
Yes.
I thought there were moments here and there, like them trying to talk her through unlocking the car door, the part where she finds Jesus, even her asking for the guy's
Yeah, that
turkey
scene,
sandwich.
I thought that scene was pretty funny.
Pretty funny.
Yeah.
And I thought that like if they had kept it in the realm of that stuff, it
Yeah.
could have worked as like light and funny. But there were too many other moments that
Yes.
colored the whole thing dark and depressing.
Yeah, I just could not watch it in any way other than just sad and horrifying and just depressing. I was just
Yeah.
like, this is just, I don't like this. And yeah, that's the thing, is where they were 100% going for comedy the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that also hasn't aged progressively
Yep.
or potentially
Yep.
or particularly well. And like you said, some of the scenes do work and are funny. Turkey sandwich scene, pretty funny. Moments of it, other moments of it are
Well, the turkey sandwich thing is complicated by the fact that it's sandwiched between some not particularly funny scenes.
yes.
But like just the moment, just
Itself,
the
yes.
singular
The
moment,
singular moment
where
is-
she's telling him about how Nora always makes her a turkey sandwich, and
Yeah.
then she's like,
Is that a turkey
turkey
yes, I
sandwich?
laughed when she said, "Is that a turkey
Yeah.
sandwich?" I laughed out loud at that moment. It's just and maybe it's a credit to the actress Ari Grainer, I think is her name, of playing it maybe too well. There were times where it was just too real and sad, and
Yeah.
like, good Lord, like it just feel
Yeah.
like terrified for this person and not laughing at her hijinks. Like I'm just like, oh my God, please somebody help her. Like
Yeah.
what is happening? Yeah. All right. That's all the questions I had. It's now time to find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
all right, so let's talk about Triss. Triss eventually has much more depth in the book. Now, it doesn't seem like it's starting off because we see her through the eyes of Nick, who she just dumped him.
Obviously, he doesn't like her.
Well, he idealizes her, but
Right,
also
yes.
like has a lot of complex feelings for her.
Right.
And also Norah, who doesn't particularly like Triss.
Yeah.
And also maybe has some other feelings for Triss that she doesn't confront. Potentially. The movie plays Triss pretty one-dimensionally as kind of a mean girl. But that is not the case in the book. Specifically, there's a couple moments, like Norah has this memory of a time that she had a pregnancy scare, and Triss was the only person who helped her.
Yeah.
And then there's another scene later in the book where Triss and Nick actually have like a heart-to-heart. Like they talk. She doesn't try to get him back in the book. Like the movie does this thing where she doesn't want him, but she doesn't want anybody else to have him. So she's kind of like stringing him along. But in the book, she like very specifically broke up with him because she knew that he felt more seriously than she did, and she didn't want to string him along. And they actually like sit down and have a conversation about that, and she tells him to go get Norah and to like absolutely not let Norah get away because she's a great girl.
Yeah. That's a much more interesting.
Yeah, like it's much more interesting. There's much more depth to it. It's not this like teen movie one-dimensional mean
she's
jealous
very
girl.
much a caricature of a mean girl in the movie, for sure.
There were also some changes to Tal's character. I thought that we lost a bit by having him be in the narrative as just like a generic jerky guy, whereas in the book there's a little bit more like layering and depth to it. Like him and Norah have been like on again, off again for a really long time. It's like 5 years in the book. I think they say 3.
They say 3 in the movie.
In the movie, but like especially when you're only 17, 18,
Yeah,
that's
it's their
a
whole life.
long time.
Yeah.
That's your entire
dating life,
adolescence. And there's a lot more layers to him being like controlling over her, and what's the word I'm looking for? like putting her down and all this stuff. Like there's just, I feel like, more layers to it in the book that we didn't really get in the movie.
I will say in the movie, I thought initially they were going a different direction with his character that I thought would have really been interesting, which was that I initially, in our first handful of interactions with them, like the first interaction, he comes across douchey.
Mm-hmm.
Then when she meets up with him again after, like when it's him and when he runs into Michael Cera and they're like it's like a traditional like alpha male standoff nonsense. Or I think that's the first interaction. Maybe it's not. Anyways, I felt like we established him as kind of a jerk to begin with, but then we see her with him alone, and it seems like he's kind of just a normal dude, at least initially. But then the movie it takes the hard turn into, oh, can you take care of the bill? Also, can you give, like, he very clearly just turns into him using her for her money and her dad or whatever, in a way that was, I found very boring. Like, it just like, fine, I get it. Like, but it just felt very simple. Because initially I actually thought they were going to do something much more interesting with his character and make him much more of a well-rounded, like, foil to Nick, kind of, in the terms of like, maybe him and Norah aren't right for each other, but he's not like just a douchebag. Like, maybe he's not, because there are times like in their relationship in the movie, like where they seem cute together and like they make sense, but then it just, like I said, immediately after that it takes this hard turn into him like, oh, make sure you give our CD to your dad. Also, can you pay for our bill? Also, like he just immediately turns into this like he's only using her thing, and it's like, I don't know. It just felt felt a little like cheap and thin, and I don't know.
I think we lost a lot of layers to him, like I said, from book to movie. For what the movie does with just making him like a kind of generic douchebag, I appreciate the scene where we're shown that he's just using Norah for her connections. Yeah. But overall, I think the whole thing is underdeveloped and thin and not particularly interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
In both the book and the movie, Tom, who is one of Nick's friends, makes this speech about "I Want to Hold Your Hand" by the Beatles. Yeah. About how like, well, that's all anybody wants, just somebody's hand to hold. Blah. And I thought it hit better in the book. Maybe it was placed better into the narrative. It felt wedged into the movie to me. Whereas in the book, it's kind of a pivotal moment for Nick that helps him adjust his perspective. And again, I think we're missing the inner monologue from Nick in that moment. Let's talk about that encounter with the random homeless guys. Yeah. Which was weird. Yeah. Problematic for sure.
I was like, hey, look, it's a random Andy Samberg cameo playing a problematic homeless person. And unhoused person.
Like, because Nick goes and they think Caroline is in a church somewhere because she mentioned seeing Jesus, so he's going to look inside this church, and then he gets accosted by like this gang of unhomed people. Yeah. And it's very problematic, and it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. Like, was I supposed to find it funny or
You're
what?
supposed to find it funny. It's something that I that's another one of those things that we've come, at least in a lot of respects, come a long way of in a very short time. Same way with like sort of trans representation in media and it was incredibly common for homeless people, unhoused people, whatever term you prefer, to be just joke, like the butt of a joke. Butt of the joke. Just that, literally just expendable butts of jokes in movies forever, for always. That's always been the case, and even in particularly seemingly progressive movies, that has just always kind of been the case. And so it's one of those things where it's not like a particularly out of like. It's not a particularly like egregious sin of this movie in the sense of like everything was doing that. Yeah. All the time until I don't want to say everything was doing that. Oh, like there are plenty of people who weren't. I'm just saying that like it is in media. It's just sort of par for the course.
In 2008. Yeah. And now watching it in 2021, it hits different.
Yes, absolutely. And it is one of those things that that's just. it's, we talked about it a little bit. It's just one of those things where we've as a society, in the manner in which we depict certain groups and people in media has changed so much so quickly.
Yeah.
And what has sort of become acceptable, and not even acceptable, but just like we've realized what's not great in sort of a very short amount of time as a culture, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, within half of our lifespan.
Yeah. Literally, it's in the time I've been doing YouTube.
Yeah.
The sort of like acceptable punching bags of like jokes and comedy has changed immensely for the better, like in a way that I think is incredibly good and like is making the world a much better place, and I'm very happy about it. But it is one of those things that it's just like it is kind of wild to see that, because 2008 was not a long time ago. And I also don't want to completely excuse it, because there were people, and there were plenty of people, and there were plenty of stories being told way before 2008 that didn't exploit homeless people or trans people or whoever. Like, take your pick of marginalized groups in society. There are plenty of pieces of media who were very sympathetic and did not exploit and sort of use those marginalized people as pawns for comedy or whatever. But it is, I think we'd be lying to say that it's not something that we've sort of realized very quickly in the matter of a decade. In my lifetime, like I said, even from the time that I've been on the internet, like as a personality, it has changed a lot. And it's something that I think is really, really interesting. And I don't know, this is one of those instances where it's like, you wouldn't even 5 years ago, nobody would have batted an eye at this scene. I want to say nobody again. People would have.
The majority
of people,
of viewers, probably would not have batted an eye at this scene.
I wouldn't have, and that's an indictment of myself. But I not something I would have even thought of 5 years ago, 6, 7, 8, whatever, however many years ago, wouldn't have batted an eye at. But now is like, oh yeah, no, it's not great. It's not great, and I'm glad that we've realized that it's not great. I think it's a good thing.
So in both the book and the movie, we end up seeing a little bit of a drag show.
Yeah.
In the movie, it is a Christmas theme. So hey, look at that. We picked a seasonal movie here. But I liked the book's version better, which was drag nuns doing The Sound of Music. Okay,
that sounds incredible.
I know. It sounds incredible, right? Also, Norah is good friends with one of the queens. And then later on, while they're still at this venue, because this is actually where they see Where's Fluffy. Yeah. Like as the story progresses is in this venue. And this queen that she's friends with, Nick also later has like a heart-to-heart with about his previous relationship with Triss. But because that person is dressed as a drag priest, it's all framed like Nick is going to confession.
Yeah.
And like
that's fun. Yeah,
it's fun. That's fun. Like, it's kind of clever in a way that doesn't feel real, but it's fun. And like, it's a fun scene that the movie just totally drops.
No, that would totally work. It doesn't. That would feel real enough for this movie. Like, that would be fine. No, that would have been really fun. It's disappointing.
I didn't understand the movie's inclusion of Norah crashing Nick's car. Because, like, nothing happens with that. Nope. She crashes his car into a fire hydrant, and then they're immediately just in the studio. And we never address the fact that they crashed into his only car into a fire hydrant, which would be a problem.
Yep.
And I don't understand, like, what am I supposed to glean from this? What is it telling me? What am I to further understand about either of these two and or their relationship? Please tell me, movie. I don't know.
I don't know either. I guess the idea was just they needed to have to walk somewhere.
I guess.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
But we've already established that sometimes his car doesn't start, so they could have just made it not start, which is what happens in the book.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense.
So I think I like better in the book that Norah tells Nick who her dad is. Like, she tells him her last name, and he still doesn't know
What is her last name?
I think it's Silverberg in the book.
Oh, okay, that's not the guy.
I would have to look.
I was just wondering because I looked at the credits in the movie, and I was wondering because I looked up the two guys that could have been her dad in real life, and I was wondering if her character had the same last name, and she did not because
it's Silverberg in the book.
Well, then, unless that's a different person that I'm unaware of, but the two guys who founded the studio.
I mean, they also don't go to that specific studio in the book, so.
Oh, really?
I'm just saying.
Oh, okay. Because in real life, the Electric Lady Studios was it was commissioned by Jimi Hendrix, but it was designed by architect John Storick and audio engineer Eddie Kramer, which made me think her dad would have had to been one of those two people, but maybe not. Who knows? Anyways.
So anyway, she tells Nick what her last name is, and he still does not know who her dad is. He doesn't make that connection. And in the book, she's very uncomfortable with her legacy, and it's kind of a source of comfort to her that he doesn't seem to put any stock in it.
Yeah.
And I feel like the movie undermines that by having Nick immediately just fangirl all over the recording studio.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it makes sense that he would know.
Yeah.
The movie's version of him knowing about
Right.
it makes total sense. But I get what you're saying that storytelling wise, it feels better that he doesn't. Yeah.
It makes me vibe with him more as a character and as a person.
Right.
That he doesn't know.
Yeah.
I preferred them making out in the ice room at a random hotel by the light of a Pepsi machine to recording her first orgasm in her dad's recording studio.
Yep.
That whole thing was weird. And I also hated the end of the movie. It's just so it's so tidy. Everyone shows up at the same place, and every conflict is resolved, except Caroline's still drunk, I guess.
A little less drunk now.
It's just what are we doing?
Yeah. All right. Time to find out now, though, what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I liked seeing Norah taking the mix CD out of the trash in the beginning after Triss throws it away. The book does talk about how much she likes his mixes, but I thought that was a kind of a fun little visual, good scene. Nick's band also doesn't have a drummer in the book, but I liked the silly addition of the electronic drum toy.
Yeah, at their gig.
Yeah, that he can't figure out how to work after the song's over.
Yeah, it's fun.
I thought giving the narrative the through line of searching for a secret show was a good call. The book kind of meanders, which works for a book, but I think it would be less functional in a film. Although the film also arguably abandons this at the 11th hour, so I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, like we said it before, that is kind of the point that they abandon it, is that they found each other. They don't need to find the band.
But also they were already there.
Yeah, you were already there.
I think I like that the movie flips the script and has Norah ask Nick to pretend to be her boyfriend. I think it does cut down on the potential kind of creepy factor with having her approach him instead of the other way around.
Yeah.
I thought having Caroline escape the van made absolute sense.
Yep.
And then the search for her gives them further reason to run around the city together. It also brings Nick's friends back into the narrative, and they're fun. And also this narrative needs more people in it. Maybe they realized that the two leads didn't have any chemistry together. They were like, we got to get these other people back.
Yeah.
We need other people in this movie. And the main thing that bugged me about this book, the main kind of thing that I disliked about it, was that it was wall-to-wall banter. It was all witty banter all the time, even in the internal monologues. Nora's chapters were especially bad about that. It was like all clever banter trying to make me believe that this is how people actually talk. And
I even felt that way in the movie at times.
We've talked before about how like some
how
especially
about 30-year-old screenwriters
and
write.
especially like characters that are kids and teenagers often feel like this is a room full of 30-year-old screenwriters sitting around being clever.
Yes.
And you said you felt that way sometimes in the movie.
A little bit, occasionally.
The movie is like 1/100th of what the book is. Some of this book was just absolutely infuriating to read.
Yeah.
It was just like all like referential and like very witty. And I'm like, nobody thinks like this. Yeah. Nobody talks like this. Especially nobody thinks like this.
Especially not 17-year-olds.
Yeah.
17-year-olds are fucking dumb. They're all stupid.
Like, and I think there's an argument to be made for writing elevated versions of things that are more interesting than what reality is.
Yes, absolutely.
But this took it too far. Yeah. It was too far.
Yeah. Because and you are right. Like as a counterpoint to that criticism that we have levied at times against pieces of media that have teenagers or whatever, is that yes, you are elevating it. You're making it more interesting. Because obviously, if we just watched how teenagers talk all the time, it would be kind of boring because they're all fucking stupid. But that being said, it can be really frustrating when the characters feel completely beyond the realm of possibility of like, yes, nobody's behaves like this. No, that's not how anybody talks. I don't talk like that as a 35-year-old, let alone as a 17-year-old.
And it was just hard to read.
Yeah.
You know, like especially all of the like dated references and stuff that I couldn't even Google. I was like, I don't even know what they're saying half the time.
Yeah. Yep. Oh boy. All right, we got a handful of things to talk about in the movie Nailed It.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Right off the bat, I thought the movie nailed Caroline. Drunk Caroline. Good old drunk Caroline. From the brief time that we spend with her in the book, this is absolutely how she reads. So, Norah has a line early on in the movie when they're watching Nick's band perform, and it's one of the first lines that she has in the book as well, where she's talking to someone. I think it's Caroline in the movie, but I think in the book it's like some other like member of some other band. It's not important. But they're talking about Nick, and this takes it back to her concerns about his sexuality that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. And she's talking about this other person's like, is he a mo? And she's like,
that was another one that
no.
That was another term that I didn't know.
And she's like, no, he's not a mo, and I can tell because blah 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 blah. But then immediately starts questioning it. And it took me like 10 freaking minutes reading this book. I was like, what the fuck is a mo?
Oh my God, is it homo?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's homo.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I know. It's like I was like Googling like what the hell does this mean? I don't remember anyone saying that.
No.
Maybe it was an East Coast
That must
thing.
have been an East Coast
I don't
thing.
know.
I heard a lot of terrible, horrible slang terms for gay people over the course of my lifetime as a high schooler in the Midwest, and I've never heard mo. No. Oh my God.
So I was like fully expecting that to not make it into the movie, right? I was like, surely that's not going to make it into the adaptation. But lo and behold, it did.
God. It was like I was listening to you talk about that, and then my brain, it just like clicked, and I was like, oh, surely not. Oh,
surely
God.
yes.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Nick does have a Yugo in the book. It also won't start, so we nailed that.
Nailed it.
They nailed Nick's Salvatore jacket, and Norah eventually keeping it. Mm-hmm. The scene where Nick calls his phone because it's in his jacket pocket, to apologize to Norah about blowing it with her. That's from the book.
That was a cute scene.
Yeah,
that was one
yeah,
of
it's
my
a
favorite
cute
scenes in the
scene.
movie, honestly. I thought that was really cute.
Yeah. And then the following montage where they're just like chatting with each other and walking around, that was the most like the book that this movie ever was the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's basically what the book is just them like chatting and walking around.
That 10 minutes of the movie was like the best part, like the phone
Yeah.
call and then them hanging out afterwards. And I think part of it, I think is that Michael Cera's character works best when he's apologizing. Michael Cera as an actor, if he's apologizing, I buy it because Michael Cera
kiss.
should be
10 out of
apologizing
10.
all the time.
Get that man an Oscar. Nora's favorite song from Nick's mixes does end up being one that he wrote. That's from the book. And they do have a conversation about a Jewish term that I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of, tikkun olam.
Yeah, tikkun olam.
They do have like that, basically that exact conversation that they have in the movie is also in the book.
It felt like it had to be because it was a very specific
Yeah, it's a very
thing.
specific thing.
Yeah. Cool. All right, we got a handful of odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
I just want to say that my official analysis is that book Nick is better than movie Nick, and movie Norah is better than book Norah.
Fair enough.
That's my official analysis of these two pieces of media.
Fair enough. I had a note when we're in the bar, as is right before Nick has even met Norah, and she's standing next to Triss, and I think Nick is looking at both of them, and he's pining over Triss, and I was like, imagine pining for it, like anybody standing next to Kat Dennings.
Right.
Like, what? I don't buy it. She's standing right there.
You know, I'm always happy to watch Kat Dennings in anything, but I do wonder if she was quite the right choice here. Like, I don't buy that anyone would think of her as plain.
No.
And like, as we've said, she and Michael Cera have no chemistry.
No chemistry together.
Like, I mean, given
I
the
think
choice,
she was a good choice.
I would
just
recast Michael Cera.
Yes, I think that's the thing. I think she's a good choice. I just don't think Michael Cera's a good choice for this role.
Bad choice.
I think she's
terrible
great.
choice.
Because I
How
do
did
think
he get this role.
Yeah, I do think that I can buy Kat Dennings as like you said, the brunette friend who's very clearly very attractive, but given sort of early 2000s
Like,
conventions
tropes
of
and
beauty,
narratives and
like
yeah.
I can buy her not being considered like the peak of the pyramid of like the high school
feminine beauty.
Yes, of feminine beauty in high school, which is again absurd because she's Kat Dennings. But like I get it within the context of the time period and what like
Sure.
I can buy
That's
that.
fair.
So
That's
like
fair.
it doesn't necessarily like again apart from both of our undying love for Kat Dennings, I get the casting, and I think it does work. I just think Michael Cera doesn't make any sense there.
I'm trying to think now who I would even cast as Nick.
I was trying to think,
Because that's the problem.
and the only thing that kept coming to mind, and it obviously wouldn't work at the time, but if we were like time traveling, is that I think I would cast Timothée Chalamet as Nick, based on like the punk rock, like the description from earlier.
See, the problem
I could see
is-
Timothée Chalamet or Andrew Garfield, maybe.
Maybe. The problem is that I feel like a lot of like the male heartthrobs from that era were kind of douchey.
Yeah.
Maybe they were like, okay, we can have a douchebag or we can have Michael Cera.
True. Yeah, I would have to go back to 2007 and figure out who I think would make sense because I don't know. I can only think of like modern current times. Like I said, I think, and maybe not even modern times, but I think Andrew Garfield might have made sense at a certain period in time. And I like my current day casting would have been Timothée Chalamet, I think, but I think Timothée Chalamet is the answer. because I think he's just a really good actor, but
Okay,
I also think he can do the punk.
I'm looking at a BuzzFeed article called 19 Guys You Probably Had a Crush on in the 2000s and Still Do Today.
There you go.
We're just going to run through this real quick. Adam Brody, I think, could have worked.
Yeah, but nah, he could have been he could have been tall. He could have been tall.
I think if you scruffed him up and made him look a little more like he was in a band.
I can't get past Adam
worked.
Brody since seeing Jennifer's Body as anything other than
fair.
Adam Brody in that. So to me, he would be a better tall, but
Chad Michael Murray's too douchey looking.
Yeah.
Jesse McCartney, wrong vibe.
No, not even close.
Josh Hartnett, no.
Maybe. Josh Hartnett's close, but he's too old. He would have been too old.
Tom Welling, maybe. That could have worked.
Nah, no, he's too well. Only for me, no, because he's Clark Kent. Like he's too good boy. Like he was Superman. Like he was Superman. I couldn't place him as anything other than Superman, and so he wouldn't fit. He would be just as out of place as Michael Cera to me. But
that's the end of the list. None of them work.
Timothy Chalamet, time traveling Timothy Chalamet. That's my casting. My last note that I thought was interesting is that when he gets to they get to the studio and Michael Cera picks up the guitar that's not in the studio, but like the where the mixer and stuff is. Mm-hmm. He's like, oh, it's left-handed, and I'm like, oh, that 100%. The implication is supposed to be that is Jimi Hendrix's guitar that's just been sitting there for
just sitting out in
40
the open.
years or whatever, 30 years, just sitting, because it is specifically not a left-handed guitar. It is a right-handed guitar with the strap on to be played left-handed, which is how Jimi Hendrix played guitar. He played a right-handed guitar left-handed. And so I think the implication is that is supposed to have been Jimi Hendrix's guitar. And like you said, it was just sitting in this studio completely just on a guitar stand for 30 years or whatever. Like what is happening? Okay. I thought that was very strange. It made me laugh.
It's odd. It's odd.
It's definitely like an Easter egg reference for music people, but it's just like when you think about it for a second,
that would absolutely not be there.
Why would that be there? Yeah, it makes no sense.
Like they'd have it on the wall or something.
Unless I'm missing something about it. Yeah, but I was like, that was the only thing, because I was like 100% that's a Jimi Hendrix like reference, because I talk about how Hendrix founded the studio.
Yeah.
Like he was. Got to be a Hendrix guitar, whatever. Why would it be there? Okay. All right, before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you that you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there. For $2, or $15 a month, you get access to different stuff at every level. At $5, you get bonus content, which is the good stuff. We just did a review of The Witches 2020 as a companion piece to our previous our episode.
Is that out? Did you post that?
Oh, no, it's not out yet. And when you're hearing this, it won't be out, but it will be within a couple days because I forgot to edit that because we went out of town. But it will be out momentarily. Probably around Thanksgiving it'll be out. Day after, something like that. So look out for the Witches 2020 episode. You get that for $5 and up a month, along with a bunch of other bonus content. For $15 up a month, $15 and up a month, you get access to priority recommendations. So if you have something that you would really like to hear us talk about, you support us for $15 a month, you can send us that recommendation and it'll go high on the list. Mm-hmm. Still a ways out because we're scheduled pretty far out.
But pretty far out
it'll
at this
go
point.
To the top of the list after other people who have already recommended things at the $15 level. There you go. You could also do us a giant favor by heading over to any of the social media platforms that you normally frequent and searching for This Film Is Lit and then following us there. I mean, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, all of those places. We have a page. You can follow us and do all the good stuff that you normally do on social media there. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
I went into this episode knowing that I had previously read the book and seen the movie, but remembering very little about either. I did go back on Goodreads to see if I had reviewed the book back in the day. I last read it in 2012. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars
Okay, so middling review.
and did not write a review, which is fairly close to how I feel now. I might dock that to 2.5 stars. The book is just okay. The film is also pretty bland.
Yep.
I think there were a handful of good choices made, namely cutting down on the uber clever banter, giving the narrative and through line of searching for the secret concert, and bringing Nick's friends back into the story by way of the search for Caroline. I thought those were all good choices. However, whereas the possible exploration of Nora's internalized biphobia in the book isn't perfect, at least the book does do something with that. The movie kind of just uses it as a very weak punchline.
Yeah.
And like when I say weak, I mean very weak.
Very weak, to the point where, because I actually, I meant to bring this up. I actually went and looked because there's a very extensive list of bi characters in media in several places on the internet. And I went to Wikipedia, has a pretty good list. And there's also, I think it's like bi.com or something, has a pretty extensive list. Went to both of those. And her character is not listed on either. So it's
pretty weak.
It's weak enough that neither of those lists wanted to claim her, and those lists claim lots of people who are very like subtextually bisexual. So yeah.
I also made a note fairly early into my reread that I couldn't recall how the movie handled the absolutely massive amounts of inner monologue in the book, which are pretty pivotal to understanding character beats and actions. And it turns out that the movie just didn't. There was basically no attempt to mitigate that loss, and I do think that it had an overall negative impact on the story.
I did mention that in the prequel that they had originally planned for voiceovers and then decided not to.
Scrapped that, yeah. And lastly, as I've said, I just didn't buy the two leads together in this movie, and in a story that is purportedly about the start of a romantic relationship, I think that's a problem.
Pretty big problem.
And so for those reasons, I'm going to give this one to the book.
Fantastic. I don't disagree. And I did not read the book, obviously, but that book, the movie, I thought was particularly middling, like just not great.
Like I said at the beginning, I think probably the best way to indulge in this film is with a group of friends that will sit and kind of razz it with you. Yeah. You know, if you're into imbibing, you could probably pretty easily make a drinking game out of this movie.
And I will say, and I think that's the thing that's interesting, because it's not like a bad movie. Yeah. Like it's a pretty, like it's a like competently
it
made
work for good, bad, or bad.
It's a competently made movie, and it has good moments, and it is fun at times. But I agree that it would still make a good movie for that, because it's so dated to 2000, mid 2000s, and it's bad enough.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah.
That I think it would work for that, while not being a bad movie. Like it's a weird middle ground thing that just kind of ends up in like a no man's land. Yeah.
It's there.
Absolutely. Katie, what are we doing next?
Coming up, we are kicking off the festive season of festivities.
The festive season of festivities.
With a novel by one of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett.
Indeed.
We're going to be talking about Hogfather, which was adapted in 2006, I believe, for BBC. It's like a two-part TV movie.
3 hours long.
Yes.
2 1.5 hour long, like, episodes.
We're probably going to watch it over the course of 2 evenings.
Yes.
And not one.
Yes, definitely.
But I am pretty excited about it because I've actually never read Hogfather.
Yeah.
And I've never seen the movie, but I love Terry Pratchett. So I don't think a ton of his stuff has been adapted.
No, I mean, until Good Omens. Good Omens is the biggest, and that's not just him, that's him and Neil Gaiman.
Discworld is so expansive, it strikes me as something that would be potentially tricky to adapt.
Well, yeah, I think there are other adaptations of like of like one-offs and stuff, but like from my understanding, I don't have a vast understanding of Terry Pratchett's works. I've read 1 or 2 things, but it strikes me, because it is such like a shared universe and not so much like a continuous the like narrative throughout much of his stuff that it's you. Yeah, it doesn't lend itself to like, especially like Discworld doesn't lend itself to like a grand 7-part movie series so much as it does to like like random one-off like TV movies. I don't know. Yeah, I am excited because the little bit of Terry Pratchett I've read I enjoyed very much. Very much falls in line with one of my favorite authors, Douglas Adams. They were contemporaries and good friends. And I don't think I'm speaking. I think they were good friends. I'm fairly certain that is correct. I think. I could be wrong, but I'm like 99% sure. I am excited for it because I do like what I've read of Terry Pratchett, and so I'm excited to watch this movie. It should be fun. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.